on our YouTube channel. So we are recording now. And it's 7 o'clock. So let me officially say welcome to our second of 5 book talks for Ashland Chautauqua. Our theme for this year is History's Real Action Figures. And we have 2 of those with us tonight because Larry Bounds is our last book talk that won't come along till April, but he's on the call with us, and he'll be talking about Harry Houdini for a little tease looking ahead. But we're really glad you are here. We are so grateful that this is one of the little blessings that came out of COVID. Karen and I were talking about this earlier, that there were some good things that came out of it. And this is one of them, because we would have never tried anything like this if it weren't for being forced to do all of our programming virtually. And so we started in 2020 doing everything virtually and realized this is a really nice thing. And so we have continued it. So we're glad you're here, and we hope that if it's your first time, and you can let us know in the chat where you're coming from, which is always interesting to know. But if it's your first time, maybe it's not your last time. Maybe you'll want to show up again. We'll have something in February and March and in April. And you can find all the details on our website. So Karen Vuranch is with us tonight to talk about Jackie Cochran. Karen is one of the Chautauqua performers that is near and dear to Ashland Chautauqua's heart for a couple of reasons. The community loves her because she has a history with Ashland, Ohio, and with the college. But then I think everyone, again, fell in love with her as she came year after year to perform for our Chautauqua. So we're really pleased to have her tonight. She has performed many different characters for us. So Jackie Cochran will be a new one, and maybe a less well-known of all the characters you do.
People don't know who Jackie Cochran is, and they should. And
yeah, so let me turn things over, and she will give you an overview. And then, like I said earlier, and if you just joined, let me remind you, you can put questions in the chat box while she's talking or after she's done talking, and we will just have a nice conversation and learn more about Jackie Cochran.
Okay. Well, I am delighted to be able to bring Jackie Cochran to you. And as I work on her, I am just amazed at the multifacets of this woman. I mean, she is just so amazing. She was, by all means, she is a superhero. She is born in abject poverty. I mean, she doesn't own a pair of shoes till she's 8 years old. She lives in what she refers to as Sawdust Road, kind of, and she talks about it being like Tobacco Road of the movies. But she pulls herself literally up out of by her bootstraps to become one of the most important women in America in her day. She invented revolutionary cosmetic products and had her own cosmetic company. She was certainly the head of the WASP program during World War II, but probably what she's most known for was her life as a pilot. I mean, she has, in her day, she has more records for speed, distance, and altitude than any other pilot, male or female, living or dead. And amazingly enough, that record still holds today. I mean, when she died in 1980, she had that standing. But according to, and I really worked hard to verify this, guys. I mean, I worked really hard. Where my verification came from the National Park Service, one of their websites. As of January 2021, she still holds those records. And the thing is, there's not as many records being sought at this time. I mean, she lived in the heyday of aeronautics and aviation. So she really was amazing. She met the Pope. She met Mao Zedong. She met Chiang Kai-shek and Madame Chiang Kai-shek. She met Juan Perón and General Franco, and had dinner with all these people. She attended the Nuremberg trials. She was really an important person in America. Let me just tell you, she holds an amazing number of recommendations, honors. She was the only woman to receive the Air Force Association Award for Distinguished Civilian Service. She's the only one of 5 member of honor of the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, which is a French federation, probably the most important in the world. And of those 5, she's the only woman. She was just a dynamo. That being said, she was also a very abrasive person. I will say her biographer, Doris Rich, and that's the book we read tonight, uses words like impatient, imperious, demanding, arrogant. One writer that I read said she was well respected, but not well liked. And part of that, I think, I really have examined that as I try to portray her. Firstly, I will say, if she was your friend, she was your absolute best friend in the world, and she would give you anything. And she and her husband were quite wealthy, and she would give anything she could give. When Hap Arnold retired, he lamented the only thing he didn't have that he wanted was a Jeep. So she bought a Jeep for him and had it cellophane wrapped and delivered to his house. She was generous with what she would give, but those who were her enemies, she kept an eye on. Was very strong with. But do you think about it? The average person who lived in the childhood that Jackie Cochran lived would have been crushed by this abject poverty. Literally, she only has a 3rd grade education. Her parents, when she's 10, moved to Alabama to work in a textile mill, where she is already, by the age of 11, she's the foreman of the children. I mean, of course, because she's a leader. But when she's 12 years old, the textile factory goes on strike, and her family decides, I don't want to stay. So they leave, and she stays in Alabama to support herself on her own at the age of 12. She begins working in a beauty salon and becomes a stylist and beautician. That really is her first business. But her mother was completely indifferent to her. By the age of 4 and 5, she's roaming, looking for food on her own. She'll steal a chicken and come home and cook dinner for the family at the age of 5. At the age of 7, she gets a job being a mother's helper, which means a few days before a baby's born and a few days after, she's there taking care of the younger children and doing all the cooking at the age of 7. Okay, she would have to stand on a box to reach the stove to cook the food for the family. She actually serves as a midwife at one point when she's 8 years old. So, but her mother is very uninvolved in her life. And at one point, Jackie always says that she heard her mother saying that she just was raising this child. By the way, she grew up Bessie Mae Pittman. That was not Jackie Cochran, was the name she chose. That Bessie Mae was not her actual child. And so she purported that rumor the rest of her life, that she was adopted. She wasn't. Doris Rich, the woman who we read, put that myth to bed, but she never, ever acknowledges her family as her family. She supports them. She hires them. She gives them money. When her father's dying, she goes down and takes care of him. And when he dies, she lays him out in the casket. I mean, she does a lot for this family, but she never says they're her family. So, and, a psychiatrist would have a heyday with her. It's kind of been proven that for a child who grows up with that kind of apathy in a family and unloved and unable to support themselves, they grow up aggressive and competitive. And so I think that that's sort of a really important key to Jackie's personality, is that she got where she was going on her own, and she didn't suffer fools gladly. I mean, so that's one thing that's important. Now, there was one person who got past that gruff exterior, and that was Floyd Odlum, who was her husband. She didn't take his last name. She stays Cochran. He's Odlum. Floyd and she have a very, very deep, passionate romance. They're in love, and he supports her in everything she does. Lucky for her, he's one of the richest men in America. It was said he was the only man who didn't lose money in the Depression. He owns a series of businesses where he buys and sells businesses, and he's just a brilliant financier. He owns Paramount Pictures. He owns uranium mines in Bolivia. He goes to Spain because he's going to encourage their economy. I mean, he's really, really one of the most important businessmen in America. He's the first one to support Harry Truman, which is important. And he also funds Amelia Earhart's around the world flight. So Amelia Earhart's posthumously published biography is dedicated to him. So luckily for Jackie, the man she loved was rich enough to really fund everything she needed. It was he who gave her the idea that she should fly. She was already a beautician and was starting a cosmetics company. He said, "You'll never be able to to do all the things you need to do unless you can fly places and sell it. And so it was his idea that she learned to fly. By the way, one of the very first company to support her was Halley Brothers in Cleveland. So, which I think is really nice for me to know that. So, so at any rate, she learns to fly in 3 weeks. People said it would take you 6 months or 3. She learns 3 weeks, and she never learned to read well. And so when she buys her first car in 1928, she can't read and she can't afford to fix it. So she takes the engine apart completely and puts it back together. She must have had a brilliant mechanical mind, because she just absolutely understood the mechanics of a plane and a car, and she had that ability. But probably the thing she is most well known for in her life is she is the first woman to break the sound barrier. The first person to fly a jet at Mach 1. Chuck Yeager, of course, was the first person, and he's a West Virginian, by the way, and I'm telling you, we're ready to print money with his face on it here, because we love our Chuck Yeager. But he and she became very good friends, and he helped her break the sound barrier. She later, eventually in her life, flies at Mach 2. So, but she becomes really famous for that as well, and that was one of her big achievements in life. So. Trying to think here, and then before the Mach 1, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Of course, she ran the WASP program, which was the Women Air Service Pilots, and she ran that program trying to where women would ferry planes to Europe and to Japan, and would also do other things like pull targets for target practice. That sounds pretty dangerous, and do other kinds of jobs within the Air Force. And she was very protective of that. Unfortunately, again, indicative of her nature, she didn't want to work for somebody else. And when it was suggested that they put the WASP program under the WAC, Women Army Corps, she really resisted that, because she wanted the program militarized. She wanted the women to have military benefits, but she didn't want to work for Colonel Hobby, a woman named Colonel Odetta Hobby. And when Colonel Hobby says to her that the only thing I know is about planes is the fact my son had wallpaper with planes on it when he was a child, she gets really angry and says someone who doesn't know about planes shouldn't be over the program. I mean, Hobby wouldn't have been. Jackie would, but Jackie couldn't work for another person like that. So she resists going with WACs, and as a result, the WASPs are not militarized until 1970 something, 72, I think. So so that was one sort of disappointment in her life. But after the war, she becomes a war correspondent for Liberty magazine. Oh, her husband owned Liberty magazine. It says, but that's where she goes to. She's the first woman to enter occupied China. She meets the Pope. She sees Hitler's bunker. She attends the trials at Nuremberg. I mean, she is just, and because she's a special consultant for the army, and she has this entree that the other correspondents don't have. She spent her life just going as fast as she could. She accomplished so much. She received so much recognition, and yet that abrasive personality really alienated people, and perhaps that's why she's not as well known today. One writer I read said, if as Amelia Earhart was lost, there was this outpouring of grief. If Jackie Cochran had been lost, there wouldn't have been the outpouring of grief. So the National Park Service said that Jackie Cochran went higher and faster into the frontiers of aviation than any woman before, breaking through the glass ceiling and the sound barrier, from rags to riches, blazing a trail for other heroic women to follow. I think she truly was a superhero of our day. How's that?
That sounds great. All right. So I don't see questions coming in yet, but I do want to point out that is it Francie has talked about that Lawton, Oklahoma is going to have their Chautauqua the first week of June. Let's see, 3 weeks. So first it's Tulsa, and then Enid, and then Lawton, and they're doing all aviators, and Karen's going to be one of them. And as I understand it, Elsa Wolf is going to do her Amelia Earhart. I don't know who. I see that you're saying Pearl Scott and Rose Cousins. I don't know who those performers are. But then
that was a Native American aviator. Was she actually Oklahoman?
Yes, she was born in Marlow, Oklahoma, which is oh, maybe 40 miles east of Lawton.
Okay.
And she was mentored by Wiley Post. So there's a really interesting Oklahoma connection there. And then Rose Cousins, I'm not going to be able to come up with
Is
the
that
two
Eileen?
scholars' names
Eileen.
because they're people that are new to our Oklahoma Chautauqua, and I just don't have the names down pat. But Rose Cousins was Black, for one thing. Eileen Evans is going to do Rose Cousins. She'll do a fantastic job. And there are connections with Jackie Cochran, although not always acknowledged. The WASP program rejected Rose Cousins because she was Black. But not that Jackie Cochran did that consciously or unconsciously, but there are kind of broken connections with Jackie, with these others. Okay, I'm going to bow out now.
Thanks for adding that.
Thanks for
someone has asked for a photo of Jackie Cochran, and I know
Yeah.
on my phone. I was trying to find where I have my Jackie Cochran. You keep talking. I'm going to keep looking.
Okay, well, yeah. So yeah, Judy asked if there was a photo. Yeah. Well, while you're looking for that, let me pull out, because Dorothy Stratton isn't here, but she gave me some questions to ask. So here's one that you haven't addressed at all. So did top officials such as President Eisenhower and General Hap Arnold seem to really like Jackie? Or was there some other reason for them to continue choosing to be associated with her?
Well, I would say specifically Eisenhower and Arnold liked Jackie. I mean, they were friends. Eisenhower, after he retires, he spends 3 months at her ranch writing his memoir. I mean, he comes to the ranch a lot and she, let me just also tell a story. She gets Eisenhower. She's the one that talks him into running. So many people wanted him to run for the Republican Party, and he was really resistant. So she and 4 other people staged this rally at Madison Square Garden. It's planned in her house. The "I Like Ike" slogan is planned in Jackie's living room. So they plan this huge rally, and they take a film of it, and she flies to Paris and she shows it to Ike, and he has tears in his eyes, according to her biography. I mean, I don't know if he did, but he agrees to run because of, and when at the nomination, Mamie comes over to her and kisses her and says, "Just look and see what you've done. Just see what you've done." So, I mean, she's really responsible. I mean, there's a lot of people that pushed Ike to be president, but he might not have agreed if she hadn't pushed as only Jackie can push. So, and they became very, very good friends, but she was also good friends with Lyndon Baines Johnson. And there's a very funny story where they both are visiting the ranch, and she puts them in a car and she's driving them around, and the Secret Service are screaming at her, "You can't have a president in the car without a Secret Service agent." And she's like, "Oh," and they're all laughing. The 3 of them are laughing and trying to outrun the Secret Service agents. So she's friends with them. And Hap Arnold and she really got along well. So there are many others who don't get along with her, and who are trying to sabotage her and try to undercut her. But because she had powerful friends, she was protected, I think, especially by Hap Arnold throughout the WASP days.
Those are great stories. Okay, we have some more questions. So Nancy from Loudonville says, can you talk a little bit about Ms. Cochran's first marriage?
Oh, see, that comes out in the Doris Rich book. Jackie would never talk about it, but I can as Karen. Jackie is 15 years old. She's a beauty, stylist in Alabama. No family around, no mother to guide her, and she gets pregnant by a man named Robert Cochran, and he marries her. And they go back to Florida. She gives birth to the boy and leaves the boy with her mom. Why she would leave her with her mom, I don't know, but I guess she can't do her job and watch a baby, So she leaves her with her mom. I don't think they ever really even lived together as husband and wife much. I mean, he did right by her by marrying her and give her his name, but I don't think there was much relationship there. Sadly, the little boy dies in a yard fire. That's all, there's not much when he's 4 years old, and she does go back to bury her son. 2 years later, her husband files for divorce. So, and so they don't really have much of a relationship ever. She was very pretty, and she was very lively, and she was very social. So you can see how this would happen. So she says that she picked the name out of the phone book. But of course, that is her name. Now, she did pick Jacqueline out of a phone book. She was born Bessie Mae Pittman, but she picked Jacqueline out of a phone book. But that's Robert Cochran, the Robert Cochran story.
So here's another question. So Patty asks, are you able to share the story about how Jackie reacted when Amelia disappeared?
I would love to share that. That's one of my favorite stories. And I am going to do that this summer on stage, both in Oklahoma and in Ashland, but it's probably the best story about Jackie, I think. Jackie, of course, knew who Amelia Earhart was, but it's not until she wins the Bendix that someone says, you really need to meet Amelia Earhart. And they bring them together for dinner. And Amelia says, well, will you fly across country with me? I've got this new Lockheed Electra. That's the one that goes down in, that I've got to get some airtime on. And so Jackie co-pilots for her, but they get stopped by weather. So they spend 2 weeks together on the road. And when they're done, Jackie has her come to the ranch. From then on, they are best of best friends. Amelia spends a lot of time at the ranch. When she comes, if Jackie's not there, she'll come in just to get away. She's the only woman only person Jackie lets sleep in Jackie's bedroom when she's not there. You know, they're there. And but she says, as Jackie says, Lord, how the public hounded that woman. You know, they just so they were very good friends. People were amazed. You know, here's Jackie Cochran, this most competitive person, but Amelia was about distance and Jackie was about speed. And so because they weren't really competing against each other in those kinds of races, they became friends through aviation. But there was another thing they became friends over, and that was their interest in ESP. Jackie, all her life, had this extrasensory perception. She knew stuff before it was going to happen. And Amelia was fascinated. So they started experimenting. They would find a plane that went down, and Jackie would find it in her mind, and Amelia would go looking for it. And they'd send in the rescue crews. And they did this several times, you know, where they would find planes. And so they even at one point, Amelia says, well, you can help me when I'm flying. And they even they did make some experiments as she flies across country, and it worked amazingly. Now, Amelia's husband's totally poo-pooing it, like, you know, putting Jackie down. And Jackie never liked Amelia's husband. She thought he was really using Amelia. And one time they were at the house and he was yelling at Amelia, sit up straight, wear different clothes. Why are you doing? And Jackie threw an ashtray at him. Don't talk to my friend that way. You know, so but at any rate, she tried to talk Amelia out of this race. Now, you'd think if she had ESP, Amelia would listen to her, but she didn't. So I guess they were really committed financially. They had so many people on the line, they couldn't back out. Floyd was one of them. Floyd Odlum funded this final race. So Amelia goes to, and one more thing is Jackie didn't like her navigator and said, you take him out from LA, fly over the Pacific in circles and have him get you back to town. And if he can't, you should fire him. And he couldn't. And she did. So, and then Jackie finds her Fred Noonan. I mean, Jackie was integrally involved in this final flight. They go, you know, I don't know if you know, Amelia goes west first toward Hawaii. Her plane cracks up. So they come back and repair it. So then she decides to go eastbound. And Jackie flies with her as far as Miami. And at the Miami airport, she gives Amelia the white scarf that Amelia wears, and Amelia gives her an American flag. And Jackie goes home to Los Angeles. And a month later, Amelia's husband calls her and says, Amelia's lost. And she said, I know, I can see her. Her plane, they ran out of gas. They missed the Howland Islands. They ran out of gas. They're floating on the water. Fred Noonan hit his head in the bulkhead, so he's unconscious, but Amelia's awake. And there's a ship called Itasca that's not far. There's a Japanese ship called the Maori that's not far. And she kept for 3 days giving them coordinates. And then finally she calls Amelia's husband and says, I watched her go down. She's under the water. She's dead. She's made her final flight. She goes to a Catholic church. Jackie's very religious, lights a candle and says, I will never again use my ESP. It didn't help Amelia in 37. I'll never use it again. So isn't that an amazing story? And I had the good fortune to go to the International Museum of Air and Space, Women's Museum of Air and Space in Cleveland. And there's a letter from somebody writing to her, saying, I understand you have ESP and you used it with Amelia, and Jackie will not respond to it. She says, I do not do that anymore. I have submerged my ESP. It didn't help my friend. I'm not going to ever do it again. So.
Wow. That is a powerful story.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah. Okay. So there, I'm going to couple some questions together because I think they might go together. One is, where is Jackie's ranch? But then somebody else comments that there's an airport in California named for her. And I'm wondering if there's a connection.
She goes out to the San Diego Ryanair school in San Diego, right when she's first learning to fly, and she doesn't learn much from them, but she gets involved with it. Not involved, but she has friends who are Navy pilots who teach her the Navy way of flying. One of them takes her out to his family's ranch in Indio near Palm Springs, and she falls in love with it. This to her is the most beautiful place, and so she buys 20 acres, and then Floyd buys the adjacent 600 acres. So they have this ranch in Indio, California. My friend Amy Stock, who many of you know, was driving back across country and stopped there for me and took some pictures. It's now a country club. They never had children, so her home's been turned into a country club. They had a 9-hole golf course and a Olympic-sized pool and horses. It was this huge race. They had grapefruit and lemon trees lining the driveways you came in, so that you could pick, and Chuck Yeager would pick oranges and take them back to Edwards Air Force Base. So that's near Palm Springs. And yes, the airport outside of LA is named the Jackie Cochran Airport, and there's a Jackie Cochran Air Show. So those two do go together.
Okay. Star was asking for more information about what you meant by the yard fire that son died in.
I don't know what that's. Every 3 or 4 places I have read that he died in a yard fire. What's a yard fire? I don't have any idea. Okay. I just have read that phrase, and I'm like, I've actually looked online. What's a yard fire? And nothing. I mean, it might have been they were outside burning stuff they needed to burn, and the little boy got too close to it. I mean, that's the closest I can tell.
Okay. Larry asked, how did Rich organize the biography?
Chronologically, pretty much. I mean, and there's she has a biography named Stars at Noon, and then there's another autobiography that was written using Stars at Noon, but Rich really does go chronologically, through her life.
I'm going to ask one of Dorothy's questions. How does Jackie compare to other early women pilots in terms of personality and risk taking? You may have mentioned the personality more, but what about the risk taking piece?
Hold on. I'm still looking for this picture of Jackie Cochran. That's what's distracting me. Well, of course, Jackie Cochran was a risk taker. And part of it was, again, she was very strongly Catholic. She was very, very spiritual, and she kind of felt like, if it's my time, it's my time. She didn't have a problem with that. And then the other thing is that when you kind of she put all of it into it. There was many times she probably should have bailed out of planes, but she'll stay with the plane until she is. There's one time specifically where she's the fuel's being flown back into it's being blown into the cockpit, and she's covered in fuel, and the plane's on fire. And so she lands, and she jumps out, and she starts stripping off her outer clothes right away because she could catch fire and die. But she probably should have bailed out, but she doesn't ever. So she really is, and she does push it to the limits all the time. But I don't think that was unusual. I think that many, in order to do the things they did with the technology they had in these days, you had to be a risk taker. I think every single person who was an aviator in the 20s, 30s, 40s, into the 50s was a risk taker. So and was aggressive and was competitive. It was a very competitive sport. I mean, there was always records breaking, and she never wanted to break women's records. She wanted records to be both men's and women's. She wanted to break men's records. She didn't want to hold women's records. That was really important to her. A record's a record, right, Francie?
Here's a good question, and Karen, you because it's your hometown area, you'll appreciate it. Can you tell us more about the International Women's Museum of Air and Space? It's right here in Cleveland. Is it worth a visit?
It is definitely worth a visit. It's at the old Burke Lakefront Airport, and it's free, but there's pay to park, I think, but it's really well done. I spent a really wonderful day, and I'm hoping to get back there. They had a lot of archival material on Jackie. They had some of her clothes. It was so fun, but they had boxes of original letters and copies of letters, and I got some really good information from them. And their exhibits are extensive. They cover lots and lots of women. They have a whole wall of all the women who've been astronauts, and they have a really large exhibit about women in space. And so that's one of the workshops I'll be doing for Oklahoma. Do we know our workshops yet? We should talk about workshops, but I'm going to be doing a workshop on women of NASA for Oklahoma. So that helped me a lot, all that information. And it is so worth going to. If you're in Cleveland or near Cleveland, you should make a trip.
Well, there we go.
Tell them I sent you. You'll get it. You'll get in free. No.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one of Dorothy's questions that you haven't seen, but she said the whole time she was reading the book, she kept thinking about Carly Simon's song, "You're So Vain." What was said by reporters or others about Jackie refusing to be photographed right after a flight until she had fixed her hair and put on more makeup? So yeah.
Exactly right. She landed the plane. She won the Bendix. The Bendix was the most important cross country air flight in competition. It was run by the Bendix Corporation from Cleveland. They're actually located in Avon now. And it was LA to Cleveland. And it was Labor Day. Remember Cleveland always had that big air show? Remember the big air show? Growing up in Cleveland, we could watch the Blue Angels from our backyard. But that was all part of the Bendix race. And the Bendix race was very, very prestigious. She enters it 5 times. The first couple times she has to bail out. The 3rd time she wins the women's record. But the 4th time she gets that. And where was I going with the Bendix? You're So Vain. So she lands, she wins the Bendix. She wins the Bendix, and she lands. And then one of the judges brings a car out, and she makes him wait 15 minutes while she fixes her face and combs her hair, and comes out looking fresh as a daisy. And she says, "It's an obligation that we have to look good." And she would never be seen sweaty and nasty and dirt smudged. She made sure she looked good. And she came under a lot of scrutiny with the WASP program for that, because she wanted them to also look like ladies, and people were saying, "Oh, is she trying to make glamour girls?" And she got really, it wasn't the WASP program, but it was after the WASPs were over in the early 50s. She was hired as a consultant to the WAF program, to Women's Air Force, which was within the Air Force. And she said, she wanted them to be a certain weight and a certain trim, but she just felt like somebody who was overweight and not able to up to the physical stamina should be a pilot, because in her day it was really a physical thing. It got less that way. I mean, it's more comfortable, I think, now. But and people took it totally out of context that she wanted glamour girls, but that's not what she wanted. She wanted people who presented themselves well, because she felt you need to always look your best.
Do you think that her approach about wanting to look right before reporters, was that unique to her, or was that common?
Okay. The other pilots were not that way. Yeah.
Okay.
That was a Jackie Cochranism.
Okay. And if she sold cosmetics and learned to do hair and all of that, that kind of makes sense. Keep those questions coming in the chat, because I don't see anything else, but I'm ready to read them as soon as you do. Okay, so here's one Dorothy wrote about the end of her life. So when the biographer writes such a detailed description of the decrepit condition of a haughty person at the end of her life, does that indicate a bias on the part of the biographer? Like this woman finally got what was coming to her?
Well, I think she probably was pretty haughty, but she was so miserable by the end of her life because she couldn't fly anymore. Floyd was dead. Floyd died in 75. She died in 80. She had a pacemaker, so she wasn't allowed to fly. And she was just unhappy. The only person who could make her laugh was Chuck Yeager. So, and Chuck Yeager, came and did her grocery shopping for her. I mean, he was a good friend, and she did feel like she had been bypassed, and the women's the WASPs that are finally militarized in the 70s, and she couldn't even go to that ceremony because she couldn't fly, and so I think she was unhappy, so that's why she was grumpy. She was grumpy, She wasn't well, and she was grumpy.
Yeah. Dorothy had asked a question about Amelia Earhart and Jackie's friendship that had puzzled Karen, and I wonder if what Dorothy meant was later in life.
Oh, would they have
stayed friends? I wonder if that's what she was getting at.
Would have. Once Jackie was a friend of yours, she was true blue and loyal. She was absolutely your closest friend once she was your friend. But I don't think she was. I don't think she would have given Amelia up. And she really, years later, even a couple of times, she'll give Amelia credit for something even over herself, which is very un-Jackie like. Here's a picture of Jackie Cochran. Let's see if I can do this.
Yeah, wait, maybe.
Yeah. I guess
the green screen's messing with it.
A green screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Green screen's not doing it. Okay. Well, I guess that's
Can you
not gonna.
put it in front of you? In front of your body?
I can't see
That-
anything in that
yeah.
picture.
There, that makes
Oh,
a
there
difference,
it is.
Karen.
There it is.
Oh,
Whoops.
kind
I
of,
can see delete
maybe.
stuff.
You know what? Karen, text me that after, and we'll include it in the email that's going to go out to all of you tomorrow.
I'll
Let's
text you.
do that.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, we can do that. And Star can work her magic and send that picture to all of you tomorrow. Yeah, great,
Thank you.
great. Let's see, more questions. I don't see any more coming in. Why so few people at the funeral?
Another good question. Again, she had so many of the people who loved her had gone on before. I mean, that was one of the realities. She was she hadn't been close to her family. Chuck Yeager was there and a few other people, but there were 13 people at the funeral. Ironically, 13 is Jackie's lucky number and her favorite number. She has 13 chapters in her book. She always has a 13 on the side of it. Every plane had a 13. And when it didn't have a 13, things would go wrong. All her life, 13 was her lucky number. And there were 13 people at her funeral. So she would have been happy with that.
Wow. So Larry asks, when you present her, in what time frame will you set your show and why?
Okay, so what I really thought about a lot of things. I thought about goes to a WASP reunion later in life, and I thought about doing that, but I thought, oh, she'd wear that uniform. I'm not sure I could find a uniform. That's a hard thing to find. So I really want to do her on the day that the WASP are militarized and she cannot go to the service. She's at her home in Indio, and so she's at her. And here's what I'm going to do. I'll give you a little teaser for my program. Jackie in her life had what she called a lockbox where she kept things that were special to her. So I have my father's suitcase from the 1950s. So I'm going to have this suitcase and I'm going to take things out of it and I'm going to talk about each thing. I'm going to hit 4 or 5, whatever, depending on the time thing. And then when I'm done, I'll have 20 other things in that suitcase. If the questions falter, someone from the audience can come forward and take something out of the suitcase and say, talk about this. So I'm not going to follow a chronology of her life. I'm going to open with the WASP. I'm saying, I wish I could be there. They're being militarized today. This is what I had dreamed of. And then go back and talk about the WASP program. But then I'm going to pop around and do the Amelia Earhart story, do the story where she first learned to fly, do the story about flying faster than the speed of sound. So it's not going to be chronological at all. It's going to be storytelling, I guess. So that's what I'm doing, Larry.
Okay, I'm going to ask this one. Some of this you've already addressed, but how do you consider Jackie's risk-taking behavior as a pilot when you think about her desire for power and position and material things? Would she not have wanted her privileged life to continue, or was glory worth the risk of death, or did she think she was invincible?
No, glory was worth the risk of death. I mean, she did have a privileged life. I mean, Floyd was very extraordinarily wealthy and bought her whatever she wanted. I mean, one in Doris Rich's book says something about she would land at an airport, throw her fur coat to a colonel or a lieutenant, talk to the general, and be back up in 15 minutes. I mean, she just had this entitlement, I think. But I think she just thought that she wanted the glory. She wanted that record. She wasn't afraid to die. She was so very, very spiritual. She was very, very a strong member of the Catholic Church and very spiritual. And her spirituality was very important to her. And she talks a lot about, flying up in the eye and seeing God's world and knowing God is on your side and taking care of you. And so I think that she wasn't afraid of death. She says it many, many times. I'm not afraid to die. Take me now. I've already done great stuff,
Here's a question from Lori Byron. Can you talk about her friendship with Dwight Eisenhower and the large rally her and her husband helped sponsor at Madison Square Garden in New York City?
I did
mention it, but yeah.
There were 4 people, and there were a lot of people that wanted Eisenhower to run, but these were just 4 average citizens, and so they would meet at her house, and they decided to do this rally. And what they did was they did it after a prize fight at 11 o'clock at night, so they could get the garden cheap. And so also they already have people in their place, but they bust people in from Texas, from his hometown. They had this huge rally, and she said it wasn't at all professional. It was very, very amateur. They still had the boxing ring, set up around it they were talking from. She said, but people just were really strongly shouting, "I like Ike." And as I said, the "I like Ike" slogan is invented in her apartment. I think it's so amazing. So it was really, and she had met him a couple of times. She didn't really know him well, but she just really believed in him at that point, because of his work as a general. She had met him at a few dinners and all. She wasn't good friends with him yet, but she flies to Paris and talks him into it. I mean, she's the one that he says, "Okay, have them call me and I'll run for Republican." In fact, at the time, she's also going to run for Congress herself. And she had been a Democrat. They had supported Truman, but she decides to become Republican because of Ike. But she doesn't win for Congress, by the way. She is beat out but she loses by 300 votes. So for Congress. But anyway, but she and Eisenhower become very good friends, and he comes to the ranch many times and stays at the ranch, and like I said, lives there for 3 months when he's writing his autobiography after he's president. So she and Ike and Mamie were very good friends, and she and Lyndon Baines Johnson, the story goes, and I think this will be in my monologue, but he's running for senator in must have been the 40s. I can't think when it was. I don't know, I'm sorry. And he's got kidney stones, and it's a really close race. He says, if they know I'm sick, they're never gonna, in his Texas accent, they're never gonna vote for me, and he's got to get to a hospital. So she sneaks him out of the rally and flies him to her friend Randy Lovelace in Phoenix, so that no one knows he has this problem. And on the way, but by the way, let me just back up. She was also a nurse. I guess this woman was really, really, she had taken nursing school at one point and never passes it, never takes the test because she's afraid of tests, but she had done some nursing work, and it comes back all her life. So there she's flying the plane, and she looks back, and he's going into seizure, and she wakes up her co-pilot, flies the plane, goes back, strips off his shirt, gives him CPR, resuscitates him, gets him to the plane, to the hospital, and he saves his life. And he always says, from that day, "This is the little lady that saved my life." So I mean, she's just this talk about superheroes. I mean, it's just amazing. So there
Let's see. Question coming in: how did she meet all of those presidents?
How did she meet all those presidents? Well, again, Floyd was the first American businessman to support Harry Truman. And when you support, and at the level that Floyd's supporting, you get invited to dinners. She met LBJ when she was in Texas. He was speaking at a rally, and then of course after she saves his life, he considers her a friend. She meets Dwight Eisenhower at dinners. I don't know if she does not talk about Kennedy as much, even though he was Catholic. She wasn't a supporter. By that time, she's a Republican, so she doesn't report him as much. But also, she goes to, so she went after the war's over, and she goes abroad for Liberty Magazine, but she's also a special consultant for the Army, and she literally first goes to Manila to watch the surrender of Yamashita, and watches that, and then she flies to Japan and has and flies over here, tries to fly over Hiroshima, and is the first American woman in Kyoto, and then goes to China, meets Madame Chiang Kai-shek, and just because she's representing the Army, she's a special consultant for the Army, and she's able to meet all these people. I mean, just she meets Franco because her husband's doing some work for Spain. They're going to do some irrigation. He's going to invest some money in Spain's economy. It's just phenomenal. And those are the politicians. She lives near Hollywood. I mean, she's best friends with Howard Hughes. He's a pilot, right? So in fact, he buys her plane from her, the one that she tries to the first Bendix, and sells it back to her. And is a really good friend of Howard Hughes. She's good friends with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby and Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra, and they're all at her house all the time, doing parties at her house, and all the name dropping is phenomenal. Back to cosmetics, she invented the lipstick Marilyn Monroe wore in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. So I mean, how do you put that in a 45-minute monologue? It's just not possible.
I'm so puzzled as to why we didn't hear about her. So I think we hear about Amelia Earhart because of the way she died. Maybe we wouldn't have heard of her
Well,
had she lived.
she was famous before, and that was her husband was a salesman.
Oh, okay.
Husband was a promoter, and he promoted her and sold her. And Jackie even says that Amelia was his cash cow, and he was just he was always pushing her and selling her and promoting her, and that's why she was really famous before her flight.
Okay.
But she had a good PR man.
But I'm still so puzzled as to why we don't hear about Jackie Cochran.
All these things that she did, I don't know. She didn't have children, but she had that one boy that died, and he had 2 children from a first marriage because he was about 10 years older than she, and but they never had children together, and it really broke their hearts. They wanted children, and for some reason, she also had another thing about Jackie. She had at the age of 15, she had appendicitis, and the doctor took her appendix out and left all kinds of talcum in her body. The rest of her life, she had abdominal adhesions from the talcum that was in her body. And she had so many surgeries and so many problems because of that botched appendicitis that could have been affected her ability to get pregnant. But she was devastated that she and Floyd couldn't have children. And she funds orphanages and adopts these 3 boys in Spain, and they stay in Spain, but she kind of supports them. And she's always taken on orphan kids and given them money and supporting them and all her life, because she really was sad not to have more children.
Are there more questions? See, somebody's popping in. You never know if they got kicked out. Other questions, just put them in the chat. Or if anybody isn't comfortable using the chat and you would like to unmute and ask a question quickly and then mute again, that would be okay too. Not everyone does this technology in the same way. So feel free.
Hi, Karen. This is Star. I do have a question for you. Was wondering, so it seems like she came from really a rough patch and like not many opportunities in life. And then maybe if I dived a little deeper, like what are the odds of everyone else in those same shoes? And I feel like marrying the right person got you onto that life, and just wonder if there were, obviously she was resilient, but could you give any more depth to that character?
It's hard to say, but I know of no other people from her town. She lived in 8 or 10 different sawmill towns. They would move, they would cut all the lumber down, they would move town to town. But she lived in, like I said, never had a mattress. It was called a platform bed, but they literally lowered a shelf down from the wall and you slept on the shelf with no pillow, no blanket, no shoes, no. I mean, just literally, she wore a flour sack, not made into a dress, just a flour sack cut with armholes and a head hole. That's what she wore till she was 8. She met this teacher, Miss Boswick, and she claims Miss Boswick really turned her around. She went to 1st grade, and that teacher hit her the first day. She hit back and didn't go back to 1st grade. 2nd grade, she shows up on the first day of school, and Miss Boswick was firm, but I think recognized the brilliance of this little 7-year-old, and took her home with her, bought her a dress, bought her shoes, fed her stewed prunes for the first time. It's a big deal. Somehow the stewed prunes come out in the biography all the time. But paid Jackie to carry, again, it was Bessie at the time, to carry her coal and firewood in, taught her to comb her hair, taught her how to bathe. Jackie is really a cleanliness fanatic the rest of her life. She takes sometimes 3 baths a day just because of how she grew up. But this Miss Boswick taught her hygiene and gave her books to read, specifically David Copperfield. That's going to be one of the books in my bag will be David Copperfield. And years later, she tries to find Miss Boswick. She was from Cincinnati. That's all she knew, but she does never find her. So Miss Boswick was there 2 years, 2nd and 3rd grade, and really gave Jackie that first bit of confidence, I think, and believed in her in a way that nobody else had before. And so that's, I mean, I don't know if one person can make that big a change. But then, of course, after that, Jackie goes up to the textile mills, works in textile mills for 3 years, fighting off the men touching her in the textile mills. I mean, she's so little, she has to push a cart like this so because she can't see around the big heaps of bobbins that she's pushing. And then when they go on strike, she gets a job with a hairdresser, but she's like mixing solutions and mopping the floor and taking care of the woman's kids. And she's not a hairdresser at the age of 10. But then her parents go back to Alabama. They say, okay, you can stay, but take care of yourself. I don't know. It's hard to know who could have overcome that kind of such adversity, but she did. And so, I don't know if anybody else from her community did. There's no other record of someone else from her community overcoming that.
We have some more good questions. Okay, so Lori Byron says she read that Jackie Cochran flew the Goodyear blimp with the captain in Akron, Ohio, another Ohio connection. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And then Patty says, I might have missed this, but is she at least mentioned in any movies?
There was a talk about doing a movie about her after the war. I mean, because she had so many movie connections, but it never comes to fruition. So no, I don't think she's mentioned in any movies. I don't think she is. It's really amazing how someone so dominant in politics and society could be so overlooked today. So
yeah. Now, switching gears away from Jackie and to Karen, Cora wants to know what other characters you have done.
Well, I don't have enough fingers anymore to count them all off. Certainly, and what have I done for Ashland? What have I done? Have I done Pro Book for you? I've done Pro Book. Pro Book, Mother Jones, Clara Barton, Luella Parsons, Julia Child. Who else?
Grace O'Malley.
Everyone, I love Grace O'Malley. I don't know if I've Mary Draper Ingalls. I've not done Laura Ingalls Wilder for you. Jackie, Claire, Emma Edmonds was a Civil War soldier and spy. I did her for Ashland, for Ohio Chautauqua. My mind's a blank. Who else? Belle Starr. Not done Belle Starr for you all yet. Cass Elliott. Last summer I did Mama Cass Elliott for Oklahoma. So she was a very fun character to do. Is that all of them? I can't remember now. There might be more. There might be
a lot. Oh, Gertrude Bell.
Gertrude Bell, yes, of course. Gertrude Bell, and I did, yes, right. I loved her. I hated that we for Oklahoma it was all virtual. I'd love to be able to do her live for you. That was great.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Oh, okay. Oh, and you didn't mention Edith Wharton.
Edith Wharton. Thank you. I knew there was somebody big that I was forgetting. Okay, thank you, Edith Wharton.
So, Cora, the short answer is a lot. A lot of characters. Are there other questions?
My husband says, "Who are you today, honey? As long as you can keep it straight, nobody else cares."
And feel free if you have questions for Karen, not just about Jackie Cochran, but about her Chautauqua work. That is fine too.
The process, what it takes to do this.
If not, it's okay for us to wind down too, because I mean we all know these are fun, but the real fun is knowing what is coming in July when we get to see this live performance. So I hope those of you who are in the area, and I know many of the names here are in the area, but I hope you come out to the Myers Band Show in July. Our week is July 11th through the 15th. And Karen, I believe, will actually be on Wednesday night of that week. On Thursday night of that week. So Thursday night of that week. So be sure and come to the band shell and see her. And if you haven't already registered, go on our website, which is just ashlandchautauqua.org. But we have Becky Stone doing a book talk on Polly Murray's own book that she wrote about her life, and that's on February 11th. And then Joey Medea is going to be doing his book about pirates that has his character as part of the book, and that's March 23rd. And then Larry Bounds, who's with us here tonight, will finish up our book talks on April 27th with a book about Harry Houdini. So we have a great lineup throughout the spring and a great lineup in July at the band shell. And we hope that you can all come out and visit. It looks like Star put links in the chat to register. There will be a survey. The survey should pop up as you're leaving tonight. We gather information to try to help us with grant writing and, you know, assess how successful the event's been. So we would appreciate your feedback. We will also be sending out an email tomorrow. Just a follow-up email. We'll get that picture in there, and you can give us feedback that way if you don't end up getting the link to the survey tonight, or if you just want to wait and do it off of that email, that would be fine too. So you'll be hearing from us. We hope to be seeing you again the next month. Karen, as always, you are engaging and know how to pull out the best stories to really draw us in, and it's what we love about you.
It's great.
One of the many
Yeah,
things.
great material.
Yeah. So thanks so much. If you want to go out to Oklahoma in June, you can also go see her there. I'm sure Francie and the crew would help you navigate your way around the state to see all the
In
performances.
2 weeks, I'll be going to Oklahoma for Winter Chautauqua and Enid doing Clara Barton. So come see that.
Yeah, we can just keep you traveling all year round, seeing Chautauquas. All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming out on Zoom, and we will see you next month. And if I shut this off, I think that's when you see the survey, but it may be when you exit. I'm not sure how this quite works.
Goodbye, all. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Good night.